I would like to introduce to you the man who wrote that book, a statesman, a veteran of the United States Air Force, a businessman, and my dad, Congressman Barry Loudermilk.
I hate following her. You know, Mac is my son-in-law, and he tells me last night, "Oh, I got you between your daughter and Dr. Michael Youssef." I thought he liked me here. You know, we're in a very interesting time in this country. And I appreciate so much Christiana sharing that story. It's just one of many stories that, you know, is incredibly inspirational, but they're absolutely true. We spend millions of dollars on Hollywood to go and see movies that are fiction. They come out with these movies of superheroes, but we have numbers of superheroes in the history of our country that have done such amazing things. And that was the reason I wrote the book. There's another story in there. People ask me all the time, what is your favorite story? And I'm like, well, I like all of them, but each story is for a different time period, a different person, or a different calling that you have to serve our country. One of the things that was impressed upon Nathan Hale as he volunteered was his comrade said, look, the office of a spy, it's not honorable. And his response was, because it is necessary, makes it honorable. People told me that when I first ran for political office. You don't want to be a politician. That's not an honorable position. But having Christians with a strong biblical world value is necessary to preserve a free nation. A few weeks ago, I was called to the White House. President Trump had asked me to come, and it was just a meeting with he and I in the Oval Office. He was asking some advice on some issues. And he started sharing with me his vision of what he calls this new golden era. I was inspired. In fact, I gave him the first copy, a pre-release copy of my book, and I had scribed on the inside of it to my favorite president, which is kind of an inside joke because every time he calls me, he's like, Barry, it's your favorite president. He tells you. I said, yes, Mr. President. But I'd also wrote in there to someone who has also experienced an act of divine providence. When he read those words, he looked at me and he pointed to his right ear and he said, Barry, if God hadn't told me to turn my head at that moment, I would not be here today. The other night when we heard, and unfortunately I saw the video of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, we were actually on the House floor when President Trump announced that he had passed. I'm part of a small group of people who have survived attempted assassinations. In my case, 2 of them. I looked over at Steve Scalise, who was one of those, and I could see in his eyes the same thing I was feeling. I know exactly what President Trump heard, because I also heard a bullet going right by my ear on that baseball field that morning. 22 shots fired at me, according to the FBI and their investigation. And there were definite miracles on the field that day. But as we looked at Charlie Kirk, who we all knew, I had been on his podcast. He had been a big supporter of my investigation into what really happened on January 6th. The thought came to me, why him and not me? And I could see it in the eyes of Steve Scalise and the others that are still in Congress that were on that field that day. Why him and not me? But as I started thinking about my meeting with President Trump and this idea he has for a golden era of America, which is exactly what we've all been fighting for, there's a realization is that we cannot achieve it unless we have a great awakening and a revival in this nation first. The good news is it's happening. And you say, how do you know this? was something my dad told me, who was a World War II veteran. He was a medic on the D-Day invasion. And he said, son, let me tell you something. When we were training in Europe, over in England, the Nazis weren't shooting at us. When we got on the ships across the channel, they weren't shooting at us. But when we landed on the beach and started taking their ground, that's when they started shooting at us. My former security detailee, Bart Mitchum, flew F-4s in Vietnam. And I would talk to him about trials and tribulations that me and my family were going through, death threats, and I mean, I've had a bunch of them, even recently. And he said, well, let me tell you something, Barry, you're doing something right. Because when we were flying these F-4s, doing bombing runs in Vietnam, we didn't have sophisticated electronic warfare equipment. We knew where the target was by the intensity of the anti-aircraft fire. So I started realizing something. And my dad would tell me this. Son, if you're not under attack, you're either not a threat to the enemy or you're over the wrong target. The fact that we're taking political and physical fire means that we are taking this country back and we have become a threat to the radical left. Now, I want you to think of us as the body of Christ. You know, the Bible tells us we are all called for different things. But one of those callings is to be a soldier for Christ. Now, think about what a soldier is. A soldier is one who goes in and defends liberty, or they take the fight to the enemy on the enemy's ground. That's what Charlie Kirk did. He didn't sit on the sidelines. He went to where we need it the most, on the college campuses, and he told the truth. Now, Apostle Paul, when he wrote his second letter to Timothy, he encouraged them to join me as a soldier of Christ in taking on the hardships that come with it. Because you're on the front lines, you're going to face those hardships. But I also know something else, that God will never leave you nor forsake you. And he also has told us that take glory in your tribulation, because that's my boot camp for you. You know, when God divinely delivered many of us off that baseball field, just a couple months later, my wife and I had what should have been a fatal car wreck. And as we're laying on the side of the interstate waiting for the ambulance to come pick us up, she looked at me and she said, you know this is for a purpose. And the first thing that came through my mind is, God brought me through that baseball shooting, he can bring me through this. You see, every tribulation makes you stronger, it makes you harder, it makes you a better warrior for Christ. A little while ago, I was walking off the house floor, it's a couple of years ago, and I heard somebody hollering, Congressman, Congressman. I turned around and it was Tamar Hellerman. She's the Washington reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And she ran up to me and she said, look, I've got a different request for you. Because when the AJC comes up, you know, the defensive barriers come up. But she had my interest, and I always treated her kindly and with love and just the joy of being a Christian. She said, we want to do a human interest story on you and your family because of everything that you've been through. You shot out on the baseball field, then you've been in this terrible car wreck, and then a train wreck, and then there was something else she didn't know about. It was an assassination attempt against me and my wife that had happened in North Georgia. So I agreed to do the interview, and as I started to walk away, she said, one other question. How, with going through everything that you've been through, can you still smile and act like nothing's going on? And I said, it's my faith and my family and God allowing me to have the experience of standing for him. They ran that story on the front page of the AJC on a Sunday, which was amazing. And let me just tell you this. We're in the middle of the fight, but we're on the offensive. We are winning. And the prize is the future of this country. Therefore, we should stand firm. God bless you. God bless America.